All right, welcome back, everyone. And today we are covering something that will shake you if you remember how America used to carry itself on the world stage. Here's the situation in plain terms. Donald Trump issued a 48-hour ultimatum, and then before those 48 hours were even up, he extended it by 5 days. You are the most powerful man on earth. You have the biggest military in history. You told a country to comply or face destruction, and then you walked it back before the clock ran out. That is what happened this week, and every piece of it connects to a pattern that has been building for over a year. Quick thing before we dive into everyone who sent super thanks and joined membership recently. Thank you so much. That genuinely helps me keep going. And to the 95% of you watching who are not subscribed yet, come on, it's free. One tap, do it now. Okay, let's get into the video. Go back to the 2024 presidential campaign. The Ukraine war was one of the defining issues of the election, and Donald Trump made one promise over and over. He could end the war in one day. One phone call to Putin, one conversation with Zelensky, and it would be over. Millions of people voted for him on that promise. He was inaugurated in January 2025. The war kept going. The Kiel Institute for the World Economy, which tracks international military assistance globally, found that U.S. support to Ukraine fell by roughly 99% in 2025 compared to the year before. Russia seized more Ukrainian territory in 2025 than in any previous year of the invasion. Civilian casualties went up. The New York Times reported in February 2026 that the war had worsened for Ukrainians despite everything Trump had promised. That was not editorial opinion. That was what reporters on the ground were documenting. Trump entered 2026 carrying that broken promise, and it sits underneath every move he has made since. In the summer of 2025, Trump went public with real pressure on Putin, agreed to a ceasefire or face massive new sanctions and 100% tariffs on any country still buying Russian oil. That means simultaneously threatening China, India, and every nation dependent on Russian energy. Trump arranged a face-to-face summit at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska, on August 15, 2025. Before that summit, Reuters reported something revealing based on sources close to the Kremlin. Putin doubted the potency of Trump's ultimatum. That is the specific word Reuters used. Russian officials believed Trump would not follow through, and Putin remained focused on fully seizing 4 Ukrainian regions before considering any settlement. The summit happened, no ceasefire deal materialized, no agreement, nothing to show for the flights and handshakes and cameras. Trump arrived with an ultimatum and left without a deal. The Kremlin's read had been accurate from the start. Remember that because the same pattern is about to repeat itself. February 28, 2026 is when the shape of this whole story changes. The United States and Israel launched major strikes on Iran. Russia condemned them almost immediately in language that reached the upper limit of diplomacy. The Russian Foreign Ministry called the strikes a pre-planned and unprovoked act of armed aggression against a sovereign United Nations member state and warned that they risked a humanitarian, economic, and potentially radiological disaster. Iran's response landed in the global economy in a way that could not be ignored. Tamakas effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, announcing that ships could pass only if deemed non-enemy vessels. Roughly 1/5 of all the crude oil traded in the world flows through that narrow passage. China depends on it. India depends on it. Japan runs a significant portion of its economy on energy that flows through it. Europe was already stretched thin from Ukraine. A genuine global standoff had settled in with the most important energy route on the planet locked and every major power watching. Before the ultimatum exchange, something deserves a full stop because these numbers represent real human lives. By March 23rd of 2026, roughly 3 1/2 weeks into the conflict, the death toll based on Associated Press tallies had reached over 1,500 people killed in Iran, more than 1,000 killed in Lebanon, at least 15 killed in Israel, and 13 United States military personnel dead. Millions of people in Iran and Lebanon have been displaced from their homes. Over 1,500 Iranians dead in 3 weeks, 1,000 Lebanese, 13 Americans, millions forced out of where they lived. Those figures sit behind every policy calculation and diplomatic statement that follows. Over the weekend of March 21st and 22nd of 2026, Trump escalated in a way that pulled the entire world's attention to a single deadline. His public statements and social media posts issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran. Reopen the Strait of Hormuz or the United States would obliterate Iran's power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Obliterate is not a word chosen casually, and starting with the biggest one first was a specific escalation signal, meaning any response would be methodical and complete rather than limited. Analysts immediately focused on the Bushehr nuclear power plant as the most likely target, the largest facility of its kind in Iran. But here's what changes the calculation entirely. Russia built Bushehr. Russian engineers designed it. Russian personnel were stationed inside it. And Moscow had tied real diplomatic prestige to that project for years. When Trump threatened the biggest power plant first, the Kremlin understood exactly what those words might mean. Dmitry Peskov speaks for the Russian government in official matters, and what he said circulated through every major newsroom on Earth. His statement essentially verbatim. We consider strikes on nuclear facilities to be potentially extremely dangerous and fraught with perhaps even irreversible consequences. In the vocabulary of international relations, irreversible does not mean costly or inconvenient. It means events that permanently alter the situation, things that cannot be walked back, outcomes that reshape the world in ways no party can repair after the fact. Russia also invoked Chernobyl directly, warning that any attack on Bushehr risked a disaster comparable to a contamination event that spread across a continent and rendered a region uninhabitable for generations. That comparison was not rhetorical decoration. It was Moscow making sure the audience understood exactly what category of consequence they were describing. Iran matched the language. Muhammad Bakr Galaba, Speaker of the Iranian parliament, announced that any American strike on Iran's infrastructure would make energy and oil facilities across the entire Middle East legitimate targets, not just Iranian ones. He added the damage would be irreversible. Two governments, Russian and Iranian, reached for the same word within days of each other. That alignment was not coincidental. Oil markets responded immediately. Brent crude spiked to roughly $114 per barrel. For anyone who has paid $4 or $5 at the pump, that number translates directly into gasoline, heating costs, shipping, and nearly everything those trucks and planes carry across the country. The 48 hours ran down to zero. No strikes on Iranian power plants happened. On March 23rd of 2026, before the original deadline expired, Trump announced he was extending the ultimatum by 5 days, saying the military had been ordered to postpone strikes while a diplomatic opening was explored. He described very good and productive conversations. Iran's government and the IRGC responded almost simultaneously, and their account ran in the exact opposite direction. What conversations? They asked. There were no talks with Washington. Nothing had been negotiated. IRGC-aligned media described the extension not as diplomacy in motion, but as the United States retreating after Iran made clear what retaliation would involve. Two completely different versions of the same moment, and the facts underneath both versions, regardless of which account you find more credible, are these. The 48-hour deadline came and went. No strikes occurred, the deadline stretched to 5 more days, and the Strait of Hormuz remained closed. Bloomberg pointed to a sequence that is hard to argue with. Before issuing the obliterate threat, Trump had publicly said war aims in Iran had been largely achieved and that a window was coming. Going from winding down to obliterate your biggest power plant and then back to a 5-day extension. All within a compressed window was a sequence the entire world had just watched. Markets told the story, too. Oil dropped roughly 10% after the extension was announced. The Dow gained nearly 1,000 points. That was not a celebration of American strength. That was relief that an immediate escalation had been avoided, which is another way of saying investors had been genuinely frightened by what the previous days had produced. For most of the lives of people watching this, American ultimatums carried a specific kind of weight on the world stage. When Washington said comply or face consequences, the consequences were understood to be real. That understanding formed the foundation of American foreign policy, credibility built across decades. What 2026 is testing is whether that foundation still holds. Putin looked at Trump's Ukraine ultimatums, calculated they lacked real backing, and was proven right in Alaska. Iran responded to a 48-hour destruction threat with counter-threats serious enough that the deadline was extended. Russia warned about irreversible nuclear consequences near Bushehr, and the ultimatum was walked back before it expired. None of that means American power has disappeared. The United States retains the most capable military in the world. But deterrence, the actual mechanism that keeps adversaries from crossing lines, runs on perception as much as capability. And the perception being built right now is one that every adversary is watching and recording for future use. As of March 23, 2026, 6 things are true and none of them are resolved. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Trump's military has been ordered to hold off for 5 days, with the condition being meaningful progress toward reopening the strait. That clock is running. Iran publicly denies any talks with Washington are taking place. Russia continues to warn against strikes near Bushehr. Oil markets remain unsettled, and the questions that matter most have no answers. Whether Trump orders strikes if these 5 days produce nothing, how Iran responds if they come, what Russia does if Bushehr is targeted. Nobody outside the inner circles of 3 governments knows those answers. And based on what the past 72 hours have shown, it is not clear that even those inner circles have settled on them. History is being made this week, not in some future textbook, but right now. If this video helped you follow what is actually happening beneath the headlines, share it with someone trying to make sense of the news.